Comp 1, your dominant impression unit. This is a picture of the Holocaust Remembrance Day. It's a very powerful memorial, as you can see, of bodies climbing a human hand. This gives quite an emotional reaction when you look at this. If you were to write about this particular scene, it would be an example of what we're going to be doing throughout the dominant impression unit. Within dominant impression, you're going to be using detailing, connotative diction, mood, objectivity versus subjectivity, vantage point, and rhetorical devices for effect. First of all, when we talk about diction, diction is simply word choice. And connotative diction, as you can see here, is different than just the literal denotative diction. Connotative diction is emotional meaning, it leaves impressions, it creates word associations, and connotative diction contributes to a cohesive mood in a piece or the tone of the author. It elevates the intensity of the writing. It creates cohesion while it beautifully layers meaning. Connotative diction will often develop a positive or a negative mood, but we don't like to simplify it into such terms. So use words, and of course there are more than what we have here, but there are some examples provided: amused, awed, bouncy, calm, cheerful. Those are going to be positive moods. And then you have a list in blue of words that create more negative moods. You are working through this first chapter, this first unit with us. If you are not familiar with the rhetorical strategies Google Slides that we have created for you guys, you're going to want to access that, or at least look at the packet that we provide while you're watching the video. The slides that I'm referring to are the rhetorical analysis of author's craft and style. And you will have full access to these slides all semester long. And we'll also print you a packet because you're going to want to be able to flip through here and find the different types of syntax or sentence structure as you're writing. We're going to challenge you to use different types of syntax. And there's your diction. And then we also start embedding the figurative devices and figurative language that you can refer to as you are writing.
To upload the PDF in your dominant impression module, that is the Norton Field Guide of Writing. I believe it's chapter 36 on detailing. Right here we have a passage from Ray Bradbury's All Summer in a Day. Many of you remember reading this as sophomores. And I chose this because the sensory details, the concrete details are very, very clear. So I'm going to do some underlining, and I want you to see the sensory detail that Ray Bradbury incorporates. The detailing in the first paragraph tells us that it's been raining for 7 years. There's concrete detail in here that is interesting in the way that he writes it because it's so eloquent. But he mentions rain, water, showers, storms, forests, crushing rain, grown up 1,000 times to be crushed again. This is a schoolroom of the rocket men and women who'd come to the raining world to set up civilization and live out their lives. So there's completely concrete details that tell us exactly what we're looking at, but it's in the way that these details are written, the connotative diction, the imagery, and the figurative language that suddenly makes this much more powerful. As well, the connotative diction in this selection creates the mood. And when you think about thousands of days compounded and filled with rain, the yellow highlighting being the connotation, the mood that comes about as a result of the word choice, drum and gush, sweet crystal fall of showers, and the concussion of storms so heavy they were tidal waves come over the islands. Crushed under the rain and grown up 1,000 times to be crushed again. This is not a positive mood. This is actually a very kind of a sad and soggy, but also very negative, oppressive feeling in that first paragraph. In the second passage, you can see that there's two different things going on here. There's a little bit of juxtaposition. Margot is introduced. She stands apart from the children who could never remember a time when there wasn't rain and rain and rain. There's also concrete detailing here. It tells you their age. And then it tells you about the sun that comes out for an hour. So it's showing you the difference between rain and then the sun. And the sun showed its face to the stunned world. The yellow crown or coin large enough to buy the world with is concrete detail. But it's also a very creative figurative device metaphor. And so there's differences here in how the author describes the sun and the feeling of the warmth, noticing the blushing in the face and the body, the arms and legs and trembling hands. And then it goes back to the reality of the children that their world is a tatting drum, the endless shaking down of clear bead necklaces upon the roof, another metaphor for raindrops. The walk, the gardens, the forests, and their dreams were gone. So in this particular section, not only do you have concrete sensory detailing, but you also have great connotative diction that gives you the mood. And below that, you have the selection that really describes Margot. And Margot, again, stands alone. This is a repetition and parallel structure of the idea that Margaret is completely separate from this environment. She does not fit in, and you see that as this passage goes on. The detail is that she's a frail girl. You can see that image of a tiny, undernourished or emotionally distraught child. She's lost in the rain for years. The rain has washed out the blue from her eyes, the red from her mouth, and the yellow from her hair. A metaphor, she's a photograph dusted from an album, whitened away. See all the use of color? So the detailing adds color, and you can also see the imagery. The sound of her voice would be a ghost. She stood separate, staring at the rain and the loud, wet world beyond the huge glass. So again, sound, sight, touch. And so the connotative diction in this particular section really shows you the character of Margot and her sadness in this environment. Another thing we can look at in these passages is how the use of the diction, the connotative diction, develops the overall mood of the piece. And so I wanted to go through and show you not only the connotative diction, but that also some of the rhetorical devices of the author contribute to the overall mood. For example, there is a lot of parallel structure within this selection, and the parallel structure helps, the repetition helps the overall feeling of this pounding, overwhelming sense of despair because of the rain. Okay, so the connotative diction I wanted to point out, the diction that has been chosen specifically for the mood that it creates, are not really words that become that create images, but it's rather the way that they are lyrical, or that they possess cacophony, which is the pounding sound that isn't necessarily pleasant to the ear. So if you'll notice, he uses words like compounded, crystal, concussion, come, crushed, and crushed. And then there are some other hard C sounds in that particular paragraph. But the k sound is much like a thunderstorm. It works perfectly for this piece. His parallel structure happens when you see the word 1,000 upon thousands and thousand and thousand show up within the piece. It's an overwhelming, unending repetition of days of rain. And it's not a gentle rain, it's a tidal wave, and concussive, and it's crushing. His words are chosen very specifically so that you feel this oppression of rain. He also uses some anaphora, and this anaphora, which is repetition of a word at the beginning of a phrase, happens with. Okay? With the rain, with the drum and gush of water, with the sweet crystal fall of showers. And he uses with 3 times. And that is a tricolon parallel structure. Here's another selection. It's The Road by Cormac McCarthy. And if you look at the first selection here, there are a lot of concrete details, and again, very, very specific images of a pale bride, green and leafy canopy, her nipples pipe clayed and her rib bones painted white. Just very, very thin woman as she comes to him as a dream, in a dream. She wore a dress of gauze, and her dark hair was carried up in combs of ivory, combs of shell. Again, details, very specific details. You can see what is actually in her hair and the fabric of her dress. Her smile, her downturned eyes. The meaning of downturned eyes, very seductive. In the morning it was snowing again. Ooh, big switch here. In the morning it was snowing again. Beads of small gray ice strung along the light wires overhead. She's gone. He's awoken from the dream. He mistrusted all of that. He said the right dreams for a man in peril were dreams of peril, and all else was the call of languor and of death. He slept little, and he slept poorly. He dreamt of walking in a flowering wood, where birds flew before them. He and the child and the sky was aching blue, but he was learning how to wake himself from such siren worlds. Lying there in the dark with the uncanny taste of a peach from some phantom orchard fading in his mouth, he thought if he lived long enough the world at last would all be lost, like the dying world the newly blind inhabit, all of it slowly fading from memory. Again, his details are really powerful. He dreams of a flowering wood and birds, the sky being an aching blue. But those are all things that are the siren world that would pull him to death if he thought of them long. The uncanny taste of a peach from a phantom orchard, one that does not exist in this world. And so he uses specific details to help you see that this is not a place of happiness. Returning now to our text on detailing.
There's an example here of a woman with multiple sclerosis. We're going to notice that as she is detailing her disease, that she lists very specific things, speech, walking, physical ailments, but it's the words that she chooses to use that create an overall mood or feeling within the piece. And so we're going to take a minute to start looking at the word choice that she has incorporated. Okay, I think you can see here that I have boxed in red some of the words that she's chosen to give the dominant impression. And overall, I think you can see that it's there's a sense of no control in her short description here. And so the red boxed words, the choices of these words are specific to the mood she's trying to create. This is a subjective piece. It's emotional. It's not clinical. It's not a list of facts. It has personal emotion for not only the writer, but we as the readers become engaged because of the choice of words that this woman uses. Additionally, I want you to see that there's parallel structure within this piece, and it's the repetition of the word or a variation of the word loss. Okay, we can also tell that she has used specific connotative diction to build the emotional meaning. Again, those are highlighted in red, or boxed in red. And then I went ahead and underlined the yellow repetition of the word loss or lose to show you the parallel structure that she's creating here. Her tone is matter of fact, but at the same time you can tell that there's a clear anguish in that loss that she's experiencing. The rest of her piece is clear here as well. The prose is continuing, but she also ends with this incredible line that says, "I've been lucky so far." It's almost an antithesis to the entire piece. And it's something that we need to think about when we write our own pieces, that we want cohesion of the dominant impression and the mood to be cohesive, but occasionally the use of something that is so jolting and opposite of what we expect can be very, very effective. As she goes on, as the chapter goes on, it also has a clinical brochure of multiple sclerosis. And you can see here that you suddenly have a very objective instead of subjective description. Vantage points, objectivity, subjectivity, detailing, connotative diction, choosing a mood to write towards is all what creates your dominant impression. It's cohesive, it's powerful, it's consistent, and your aim is to create something that is dominant, that is overpoweringly obvious. The feeling that the individual details all add up to this singular dominant impression. Below is a description of the quarries, and I think it's a fabulous description. You'll need to go ahead and, in your PDF, attempt to do a close read of this. Separate your sentences, go in and look at the particular word choice that's been created, and then let's see if we can come back with an understanding of it. Sentences, because I believe those are the main idea of the piece. And it tells you that the quarries will not be domesticated. They are not backyard pools. They are battlefields. Right there, the author has set up a perfect analogy. The quarry as a battlefield is a simple metaphor to begin with, but as it extends on through the piece, it becomes an analogy. It's a comparison back and forth. It also is symbolism because war is violent. It's destructive. It leaves horrible things in its path. And so the author is using all three of these really powerful comparisons to develop this piece. Okay, so all of the red are more of the natural violence, and then the things that I highlighted in blue, like machines and human ingenuity, mind and matter, basements of vanished skyscrapers, is more mankind. The red, again, resisting stone, brute force, weighing tens of tons, precarious angles, have not yet finished falling. Those are more describing the natural quarry, and it's the way it looks, and the words are chosen very specifically because of that dominant impression that the author is trying to create. I also underlined in yellow the repetition of the word between. It's repeated 3 times. We call that tricolon parallel structure. It's also anaphora because it begins the phrase between machines and planets, between human ingenuity and brute resisting stone, between mind and matter. And that really stands out. I think in the end, the last sentence sums this up wonderfully. It's, you are left wondering who would win the battle, men or stone.
That last line reminds us that the entire piece is a juxtaposition between nature and man. Nature's machines, the destruction that man has wreaked havoc on nature, and the stone and the quarry itself.
Organizing